Episode number 181 and degrees 1, Rising Rock. 181 and degrees 1, Rising Rock. The Lightning Star cruiser reached its destination after almost 2 weeks of travel. It began to descend on a zone full of rocks and unleashed a gravitational pulse that leveled the ground, generating a plane field. Such a level of destruction was simple for the Lightning Star cruiser. While the ship's offensive power could only match that of a peak wave champion due to its lack of dexterity, it could endure the attacks of wave kings. Not that far from where the Lightning Star cruiser had landed, there was another ship just as impressive as this one. It had a picture of a giant golden bird engraved on it. More than 10,000 individuals were around the ship, and one thing they all had in common was their youthful appearance. Large metallic houses were built around the ship, making it seem like a military camp. All those youths were students from Wave universities, and they did not come alone since not too far away from them, there were 10 elders whose power was much higher than a Wave warrior. These teachers only acted as watchers and would not interfere in the battles or anything else for that matter. In the center of the encampment was a small structure that worked as the center of operation. All those inside it had powerful auras, but the two at the lead were the most impressive of all.
It seems that the forces of the Imperial Lightning Fort have finally arrived.
One of the two imposing youths spoke with a large smile as he gazed at the descending Lightning Star cruiser. He had a handsome face, green shining hair and eyes, a thin yet muscular body, and a large black sword floating behind him. After speaking those words, he looked at the man by his side. This one was just as young as him, but had black hair and fiery red eyes. The physical characteristics of this man made it so that the entire group already knew of his background, since there was only one noble family with a lineage like that, and they were the overlords of an entire sector. Just the Hellblazer lineage was not enough to impress the young man with shining green hair. Nonetheless, he knew that the youth by his side was one of the great geniuses of this generation, and even more important, this one worked with the greatest genius of the Hellblazer family.
Brother Amos, the two people you came to see should be in that Star cruiser, right?
The young man called Amos also looked toward the Lightning Star cruiser, and there was a cold light in his eyes.
According to my information, they are both there. The bastard is talented enough to enter a battalion that would come to this place. As for the other one, his talent is superb, and there is no way the higher-ups in the military would have sent him to any other site but this one.
When the other students in the room heard the last part, many looked at each other with expressions full of confusion. Eventually, one spoke.
No matter how that person is, since he is part of the military, his talent could never compare to people like us.
The one that spoke was a massive youth, almost 2 meters tall, with brown hair and bronze-like eyes. He was 1 year younger than the rest of the people in this room, but no one had rejected his presence as his power and talent allowed him a place during the decision-making. Many students nodded as they heard the tall youth's words. When it came to the military as a whole, they would not dare to look down on it, but individually they could never lose. Their logic was not so flawed. After all, Wave universities were where the most outstanding talents chose to embark on their cultivation path. There were exceptions like Levi, who hated the Hellblazer family, and Lurin, whose family took the military as the main path for their power, but they were very few. Amos's eyes narrowed as he heard that, and he focused on the tall youth.
My younger brothers did the assessment. Are you saying he made a mistake?
Those words made the large youth grow pale, and no one else dared say a word. Even if that person was not present, no one dared to disrespect him. That man was just 15 years old, but his talent and wisdom allowed him a place among the ancient monsters of the Hellblazer family.
No, no, no. I would never dare to disrespect Lord Magnus. Someone like me could not compare with the wisdom of your younger brother. I am very sorry.
The tall youth immediately began to apologize. Even if both had the same age, he could not hold a candle to Magnus Hellblazer.
Ha, Brother Amos, there is no need to put Jorta in such a complicated position. He was just uttering a common point of view held by those in Wave universities. If we are honest, even I found it hard to believe there is such a talented youth among the military, but if your esteemed brother says so, it must be right.
The young man with shining green hair's voice calmed the situation and made everybody relax. Jota turned toward the youth with an expression of gratitude.
It is just as Lord Dominic said. I meant no offense to Lord Amos.
Amos no longer bothered Jota and turned toward Dominic.
How do you think we should proceed?
Amos was a very arrogant individual, making it even more impressive that he would ask for Dominic's guidance. The green youth considered things for a moment before speaking.
I am sure your younger brother made a good assessment of that man's power, but it would be useful if we do it with our own eyes. If you or I were to challenge him to a battle, it would generate all sorts of problems since we are 1 year old and both level 9 wave warriors.
Dominic then turned his eyes back toward Jota and showed a large smile.
Luckily, we have the N-1 rising rock in here.
Jota showed a smile full of pride as he heard that, and his eyes began to glow with fighting spirit. It was clear that Dominic wanted to use him to test the military genius, and he had no problem with that at all.
I am happy to help Lord Dominic. Good, this is what we will do.
Shortly after the Lightning Star cruiser had finally landed, soldiers began to emerge from it. 10 figures acted first, rising to the sky and landing in an elevated position where they could see everything. Those were the captains. In this mission, just like the university teaches, they could only watch and were not allowed to interfere in any part of the hunt. The rules for the hunt stated that only first-generation Godslayer humankind could participate. What that meant differed depending on whether you spoke about wave universities or the military. In wave universities, the first generation had no connection to cultivation. It meant all students who had yet to reach 17 years old. As for the Imperial Military Force, the first generation were all those that had yet to become wave champions or had arrived at that level within the first 3 years of their service. Besides Kane, every vice captains beneath Aaron had spent over 5 years in the military and was over 20 years old. However, since none were wave champions, they were considered part of the first generation. It was clear to all that the Godslayer humankind empire made a big concession to the Imperial Military Force when it came to the term of the first generation. 24 vice captains soon left the Lightning Star cruiser, and when they saw all the captains looking at them from a distance, they understood that everything from now on would be up to them. Not all the vice captains got along with each other, but they were all smart enough to work together in this first phase. No one would gain anything by delaying the generation of the encampment around the Lightning Star cruiser. The military was known for its strict discipline and teamwork, so it was not hard for them to generate a proper military encampment. There was still a lot of daylight by the time they finished, and the vice captains were about to gather in the center of command when they saw a group approaching. Levy was doing his work when he noticed that group, and his eyes burst with killing intent as he saw one of the men among the group. He immediately recognized Amos, and although he did not know the Hellblazer family's plan, they could not be good. Levy clenched his fist, and a golden flame appeared in it, but after a moment, he relaxed it. Jumping into the fight would be stupid. Besides, the one at the lead is not Amos. Jota walked with a smile full of arrogance as he approached the military encampment. Thank you for listening to the Age of Chaos audio story. Storyfy grows with listeners like you. Support the series by sharing it and join our Telegram for the latest updates. Episode number 182, Overwhelming Might I. 182, Overwhelming Might I. Kane finally woke up from his cultivation, and as soon as he did, he felt 2 strange sensations. There was a state of pure serenity, as if his body had finally got rid of the shackles that had restricted him for over a decade and a bursting power that filled every cell with strength and vitality. That was not all, since every breath he took and every beating of his heart worked in perfect sync. Kane's body was intuitively rejecting the air pollution, and his blood moved more than 3 times faster, despite this one growing much denser. Before blood renewal, Kane's body was an old watch. It worked as intended, but there were imperceptible flaws generated due to the oxidation brought by time. Now those were gone, and a mystic force refined every gear. Kane's face showed a smile, and he was ecstatic by the feeling of power running through his body.
System, what is my current percentage of marrow washing?
Scanning vessel, marrow washing, 79%.
An increase of only 5%, despite all my preparation and the constant use of whale lightning orb. I guess it makes sense. The pollution that remains is ingrained deeply in my marrow. Purging the last 25% is supposed to be several times harder than the first 75%.
Although Cain would have wanted this marrow washing to be higher, it was a significant increase, and he still was far from advancing to the wave champion rank, so there was a lot of time.
According to the knowledge that Apex gathered, after obtaining a 50% marrow washing, the gate to becoming a wave champion is already open. However, those that enter with that percentage limit their growth, and it would be a miracle if they reach late wave champion. Only those that experienced blood renewal can reach peak wave champion and have a slight chance to enter the wave king realm. As for flawless marrow, that is not really 100% marrow washing, but 95%. That is one of the highest theoretical levels, and you are supposed to carry on with your marrow washing during early wave champion. While it is near impossible, if you obtain a 100% marrow washing, your talent and foundation will experience a qualitative evolution. Yet the number of geniuses that have reached that is extremely small. It is not just resources that are needed to achieve that. You must also have great luck.
Cain went through the knowledge regarding the advance from wave warrior to wave champion inside his mind and nodded. He was progressing very well, and thanks to the lucky chance obtained through the blood of hundreds of people and his blood refinement art, he could reach 100% marrow washing. Of course, Cain knew that the possibility was very slight and that he would need to push himself beyond his limits during the four following levels. Cain rose from his meditative position, went to the bathroom, and cleansed his body of all the filth that had accumulated. After that, he wore his blue robe and attempted to mobilize his astral wave. Shock appeared on Cain's face as he saw just how fast his astral wave moved through his body. It was as if the roads in Cain's body had become highways. That made it easier for him to achieve his maximum wave output much faster and granted him a superb talent regarding wave focus.
My battle power obtained another massive increase thanks to blood renewal. If I were to fight Orlando again, I could have killed this one in less than a minute.
Cain analyzed his power, and while killing an early wave champion at full strength would have been hard, he should be able to handle an early wave champion beast. After finishing with all the introspection, Cain looked at the day and hour, and his eyes widened.
Damn it, blood renewal took much longer than I anticipated. It seems that the Lightning Star cruiser had landed several hours ago. I should not get into too much trouble since the battles will not start until the next day, but as a vice-captain, I should be among those that guide the encampment.
Cain could only sight as he made his way out of the ship. There was nothing much he could do, and he would make sure to explain his situation to the other vice-captains if they asked. Cain was just stepping away from the Lightning Star cruiser when he heard shouting and frowned. He noticed how two sides had formed, one made solely of soldiers while the other composed of students. Right between the two sides, a battle was going on. One of them was a large youth with rock-like skin, and the other was a soldier with draconic arms. Cain recognized Lurin and could see that the transformation technique of this one had grown more powerful. However, while he had no idea who the student was, this one was not only powerful, but also very fast. Lurin showed great battle power and skill, but it was clear that the student was much more powerful and had higher cultivation. Lurin was a late-level Fa, while the other had reached level 5 long ago. Cain frowned as he saw the battle, but had no idea what was happening. He noticed that the university teacher and the captains were looking from a distance, so this must not be that serious. Before doing anything, Cain wanted to know more, so he calmly walked toward the military side. He planned to ask one of the soldiers what was going on and only then interfere if needed. Unfortunately, while Cain did not want to draw attention, someone sent it to him.
Cain.
As soon as that word appeared, the battle between Lurin and Jota froze, and everybody focused on the person that uttered it, including Cain. The voice did not come from the soldiers, but from a student with a martial robe from Hellblazer University. He was a youth with a scrawny constitution and a pale face. By how the other students looked at him, it was clear his status was not great. Cain's eyes narrowed as he stared at that student. He could not help but feel he had seen this one before, and after a few seconds, he finally remembered. He looked much worse than the last time Cain saw him, and there was nothing of the arrogance or pride he usually showed, but that student was not other than Jonathan. That was the young man that betrayed Cain's friendship and made his life in school a nightmare. Back when Cain was in the Hellblazer sector, Jonathan was a thorn in his heart that he could not remove. However, after everything that happened this last year, After all the death, battle, and almost dying more times than he could count, Cain had actually forgotten about Jonathan. There was no hatred or resentment in Cain's heart for Jonathan, not because he had forgiven this one. It was just that Jonathan was so insignificant that there was no point in even remembering him.
Hello.
Cain said nothing else toward Jonathan before turning toward Lurin and Jota and walking toward the duo. A feeling emerged in Jonathan's heart when he saw how Cain acted toward him. It was something he had not felt in a long time, making rage appear on his face.
You dare to ing. Shut up.
Before Jonathan could even finish his sentence, another of the students shouted at him, making fear appear on his face. Cain noticed that interaction, but did not care. Jonathan was nothing for him, and he couldn't care less about this one's predicaments. The silence only intensified as Cain walked toward the duo, becoming the center of attention for both sides. Everybody in the military knew about the Blood Lightning vice captain, while those from Wave universities with powerful backgrounds knew the N-1 Lightning cadet. Jota was able to get over the shock of seeing Cain's sudden appearance. A vicious smile appeared on his face as he threw a vicious punch at Lurin's chest. Lurin was surprised by the attack, and he could do nothing to avoid it. He could only make a shield with his arms and prepare to receive the punch. However, just as the punch was about to land, Lurin saw how Jota's eyes widened with fear before immediately jumping back and making his astral wave burst with even greater strength. Lurin was confused by Jota's reaction, but he then turned to the side and noticed Cain's eyes glowed with a cold red light. Cain did not use hypnosis on Jota, since that could be considered an extreme offense worthy of a battle to the death. He simply used his ego wave to project his killing intent toward the student, and it worked just fine.
First Lieutenant Lurin, come here.
As soon as Lurin heard those words, he immediately worked toward Cain before bowing. All eyes focused on Cain, waiting to see what this one would do next. That pressure could affect many, but he had endured much worse. Thank you for listening to the Age of Chaos audio story. Storyfy grows with listeners like you. Support the series by sharing it and join our Telegram for the latest updates. Episode number 183, Overwhelming Might It. 183, Overwhelming Might I.
Blood Lightning Vice Captain.
Lurin clasped his hand and vowed once he reached Cain's side. Whether or not they were friends did not matter in events related to military conduct.
Explain.
Cain was like a rock, immune to the gazes of the thousands of people around him, focusing only on Lurin and Jota.
Shortly after we finished with the encampment, hundreds of students came to our side, and that man began to spout nonsense. He shouted that there should be a friendly spar between the best N-1 Rising Rock and the N-1 Lightning cadet. At first we chose to ignore him, but soon he began to taunt us. His words were full of arrogance, and the way he spoke about us made it seem that the military would only be helpful as cannon meat. It did not take long for him to question the honor and bravery of us soldiers, something I could not allow, so as one of the best first-year soldiers, I challenged him to a battle.
Lurin's eyes were full of resolution and courage, something that resonated in the hearts of many soldiers. However, those who had spent decades on the battlefield and the vice captains showed complicated expressions as they heard his words.
HMPH, don't twist my words. I never say that the military was good for nothing.
Jota immediately refuted Lurin's declarations. Even if he looked like a brute, he was more than smart enough to know what would happen if he insulted the Imperial military force. It did not matter that Jotat was in a Wave university, and his future was bright and glorious. He knew that insulting the Imperial military force was a great sin in the eyes of the Godslayer humankind empire. Cain focused on Jota and knew that while the students were wise with words, the meaning behind them was clear to all the soldiers. However, that was not the part that drew his attention, but the fact that this one wanted to fight against the N-1 Lightning cadet, meaning he. That drew some confusion, and Cain's eyes went to the people behind Jotat, specifically the youths with shining green hair and fiery red eyes. It did not take a genius to know that the shot callers were those two. By their emblem in their robes, they come from the Hellblazer universe and Sundering Sky Rock University. Those are the best wave universities from the Hellblazer sector and the collapsing lightning sector. Kane could not help but frown as he did not intend the agenda behind the duo, but he did not lose too much thought in that, and his eyes returned to Lurin. Lurin was surprised by those eyes as they unleashed a shocking pressure and coldness. He had learned about the ego path of power recently from his father and knew that Kane was generating a clash between their wills. He had experienced a lot of battles and near-death experiences in the last half a year, so he thought he could handle those red eyes much better than the first time he saw them in Corin City. However, Lurin felt that the pressure of those eyes was much more potent than before. He understood that whatever he faced, Kane had endured something much worse.
You say he insulted the honor and bravery of our military, but since when have those pillars of our brotherhood become so weak that the words of a mere child could put them in question? We are about to enter a gruesome fight against millions of wave beasts. Death is inevitable, yet you chose to participate in a battle and risk getting injured for something so vain.
Lurin's eyes widened as he heard that, and his face grew pale, losing all the fighting will he had before. Something similar happened to all the other soldiers watching from the side. Veterans and the vice captains acted differently than the rest of the hot-blooded soldiers because they knew getting injured before the war was a great mistake.
Your actions did not just put your life in danger, but also that of your fellow comrades. What happens if you are too injured to fulfill your role in the battle formation, if you need to be escorted out of the battlefield, or if a medic needs to spend time healing you and neglecting others?
Lurin began to tremble, and a great sense of shame appeared on his face. There was a deep sense of belonging to the military inside his heart, and he saw all the soldiers fighting by his side as brothers. The fact his stupidity risked their life was something he would never forget.
Lurin Sinar, due to your lack of discipline and awareness, I take away your rank as first lieutenant. You are now a second lieutenant. Since this is your first deployment as a true military member, there will be no data in your military record. Now leave.
Lurin did not say a word and just nodded before returning with the rest of the soldiers. Benjamin Series, one of the vice captains that worked under Captain Aaron, glanced at Lurin before staring at Kane. Lurin was part of his battalion, so Kane did not technically have the authority to demote this one. While others might think that Kane was harsh, Benjamin knew that was not true. When the battle ended, he would have harshly reprimanded Lurin and left a striking mark on this one's military record. That would have made Lurin's rise in the military ranks much harder. However, now he was just demoted to second lieutenant, something that would not really affect his military path other than delay it a few months at best. Benjamin stared at Kane for a long time before nodding. Since this was the first time Lurin made this sort of mistake, he would let it slide. Kane returned the nod toward Benjamin before calmly walking toward Jota, only stopping when they were less than 5 meters away from each other.
Who are you again?
Kane's eyes were still bursting with red light as he made that question. Jota was surprised by the pressure he felt when looking at those red eyes. His instincts told him that he should leave, but that was not possible since Dominic and Amos were right behind him.
I am Jota Hammer, a second-year Sundering Sky Rock University student, and this generation N degrees 1 Rising Rock. Of all the first-year students in the entire collapsing lightning sector, I was the best.
Jota shouted those words, hoping they would fill him with courage, which they did. Kane's eyes narrowed as he heard all that. The Sundering Sky Rock University was the best wave university in the entire sector, so if Jota was the N degrees 1, there was nothing wrong with this one saying he was the best of all the first-year students. As for the Collapsing Lightning University, there was no such thing in the Collapsing Lightning sector. The relationship between wave universities and the Imperial Military Force was complicated, to say the least. Wave universities were put in place by noble families, with the mightiest family usually founding the strongest university, just like in the case of the Hellblazer family with the Hellblazer University. The strongest noble family in the Collapsing Lightning sector belonged to no other than the Collapsing Lightning Duke. Yet, this one chose to adopt the path of the military. Technically, both the forces generated by the wave universities and the Imperial Military Force are under the command of the Emperor of Godslayer Humankind. However, the Emperor only gave missions to the wave universities, and the noble family in charge could choose how to handle them according to their wishes. It was not wrong to think of the students of wave universities as the personal army of noble families. Kane stared at Jota, and before choosing to do anything, he scanned this one with his AI chip module. The absolute life form system did not take long to finish the task. Scan of target completed. Name, Jota Hammer. Race, Godslayer humankind. Path of power, astral rebirth, level 5 wave warrior. Lineage, wave talent, pseudo tier 6. Stats, strength 5.1. Agility 2.7. Vitality 5.6. Wave Fa. Marrow washing 66% completion. Kane was surprised by what he saw. Jota was almost at the limit of level 5, but his stats could compare with someone at level 7. It makes sense. No one who became the best student in the entire collapsing lightning sector could be mediocre. Fighting against him a week ago would have been very hard and the only reason, but things have changed. Fighting spirit emerged in Kane's eyes as he stared at Jota and ignored the rest of the students.
You wanted to fight the N degrees 1 lightning cadet. Well, here I am. Boom.
Shortly after saying those words, Kane unleashed the full power of his astral wave, generating a small blast. The wave he generated was incredibly dense and pure. The power of his aura began to rise higher and higher as mighty gales formed around his body. Thank you for listening to the Age of Chaos audio story. Storyfy grows with listeners like you. Support the series by sharing it and join our Telegram for the latest updates. Episode number 184, Overwhelming Might EI. 184, Overwhelming Might III. Kane's astral wave shocked the people that saw him. It was extremely dense, not matching that of a normal wave warrior. Increasing the quantity of your wave was not hard by raising your level or training special cultivation techniques, but improving its quality was much more complicated. The fighting intent expressed by Kane made all the captains frown. They were extremely pleased with his original calmness and how he analyzed the situation, but wasn't he now making the same mistake that Lurin?
Aren't you acting against your own words?
Among the students from the wave universities, one of them was able to maintain a clear mind under Kane's bursting might. It was not other than the youth with shining green hair, Dominic. Those words made many students look at Kane with contempt as if he was a hypocrite, and many of the soldiers could not help but frown as well. Kane only smiled as he saw all that, and his eyes bursting with red light focused on Dominic and Amos. Such serenity made the Jew frown. Even if Kane's talent was as high as they were told, what bothered them more was the mental fortitude of this one.
It is true, entering a mock fight before a war is beyond stupid, as your wounds could affect not only you, but also the people fighting by your side.
Kane confused many with those words. If he knew, then why would he enter a battle?
The reason why I chose to fight is simple. This person cannot leave a single wound on my body.
Utter silence reigned after that, as people could not believe what they had just heard. Kane and Jota were at the same level, and it was clear that the second could also unleash a battle power much greater than that. Jota grew furious as he clenched his fist. He would not lie and say that the battle against Kane would be easy, but the fact he could not leave a single wound was preposterous. It was not only Jota that grew angry, but all the students as well. The young man was the N degrees 1 Rising Rock, the mightiest of the first-year students in the entire collapsing lightning sector. Kane was saying that the best of them could not put a single hand on his body.
I must say you are truly confident in your abilities, so how about we make this a little more interesting?
Dominic showed a smile as he hinted at a bet, and those around him also smiled. It was not news that those that came from wave universities had much greater wealth than soldiers. After all, noble families would spare no expense in training their greatest geniuses. Kane saw the students' smiles and waved his hand without a word, making a pile of wave crystals emerge from his space ring. The students' smiles froze when they saw those wave crystals. It was more wealth than many of them had seen in their entire life.
I bet 100 low-quality wave crystals. They have an estimated price of 1 million Imperial military credits.
Dominic's eyes widened as he saw that pile of wave crystals. He knew they were all real and their worth was accurate. To tell the truth, Dominic was not confident in Jota's chances, but he did not care about making a bet since he thought Cain could not possess much wealth. That was a mistake, and if he were to back down now, he would be making a fool of himself. Dominic sent a poisonous stare in Cain's direction before waving his hand, making 3 wave crystals appear. Although they were far from the amount Cain took out, each of Dominic's wave crystals shone with much great might. They were mid-quality wave crystals, and their value was not less than the 100 low quality of Cain.
The bet is set then. Let the battle start.
Cain sent the 100 wave crystals back into his ring before focusing on the young man in front of him. Jota could not help but grow nervous as he saw the massive bet put in this fight. Even though he had said nothing, he knew Dominic would blame him in case of a loss. Damn it. Jota cursed inside his mind before his astral wave exploded with even greater strength, and a rock armor formed around his body. The students and soldiers saw how Jota transformed into a 2.2-meter golem, and that was not all. Metal pipes formed on the golem's back, legs, and arms. Lurin's eyes widened as he saw that, and he clenched his fist as he understood that Jota had only been playing with him. He would have lost in less than a minute if this one had shown that form from the beginning of their fight. Amos was also surprised by that golem, since it was an ability that surpassed the capabilities of an average wave warrior and entered the realm of wave champions.
That is one of the Hammer family's core techniques, Elemental Juggernaut. Jota reached level 3 of that technique, something reserved for wave champion, thanks to the help of his lineage.
Dominic's words clarify some of Amos' doubts.
I see. In that case, there is a chance that he could win this battle.
Cain was also surprised by the sudden rise in power from Jota, but everything was still under control. He activated Virtual Sight before pushing his wave burst to 2,000% and generating his blood lightning. Jota focused on Cain and did not hesitate before charging to this one. Just as they were right next to each other, the metal pipes in the golem's arms unleashed a flaming astral wave, granting its punch an immense burst in speed. Everybody saw how Jota unleashed a barrage of punches that moved at a startling speed, but what shocked them was how Cain dodged every single one easily. Jota did not lose focus. Right after sending a left hook, he ignited the metal pipes on his right leg and sent a vicious kick toward Cain's waist. That kick was more than 3 times faster than the punches, and many of them thought that Cain was doomed. Just in the last second, right as the kick was about to land, Cain made a small jump, dodging the attack and landing on Jota's back. Jota's entire body grew tense as Cain had landed in the perfect position to release a vicious attack on his back, but to his surprise, nothing came. He was able to jump forward and turn around, only to see Cain waiting calmly. Amos and Dominic showed cold expressions as they saw that. The reason why Cain did not attack Jota's back was not that he could not, but he did not want. Jota also understood that. Being looked down on by the enemy made an immense hatred emerge in his heart, and he immediately jumped back into the fray, sending attacks with more and more power. The look on the students' faces grew worse as the fight carried on. Cain was dodging every single one of Jota's blows. After a minute, Jota understood that he would not be able to defeat Cain in a direct fight, so he needed to use his mind. Cain saw how Jota jumped back before raising the astral wave on his body. What is he trying to do? Virtual Sight could predict the enemy's movements as long there was information about them in the AI chip module's database. It could not anticipate techniques it did not know. Finally, after a few seconds, Jota's astral wave reached its peak. He stomped the ground, generating a shock wave that shattered the earth in a radius of 200 meters around him. Cain lost his balance as the earth beneath his feet shattered to pieces, but that was the least of his problems since Jota marched toward him at full speed. The pipes on the golem's back and legs acted at full power, and Jota crossed his arms, transforming his body into a massive battering ram that flashed toward Cain at more than 300 km/h. Cain knew he could not dodge since he lacked a stable surface, but he only showed a smile. He did not need to dodge that attack. Just as Jota was about to crash with Cain, everybody saw how the astral wave covering his body vanished. No matter if they were students or soldiers, none of them could understand what was happening. The strength behind Jota's attack was dreadful, and if it were to land on Cain's unprotected body, it could very well kill this one.
Boom!
An explosion echoed through the mountains as Jota reached Cain. The next second, everybody saw a figure being blasted away.
Zboom. Zboom. Zboom.
The figure clashed against trees and rocks, shattering all of them in its path. According to logic, the one that should have been sent flying away after the two clashed should have been Cain, but it was Jotat who was puking blood 200 meters away. Thank you for listening to the Age of Chaos audio story. Storyfy grows with listeners like you. Support the series by sharing it and join our Telegram for the latest updates. Episode number 185, Overwhelming Might IV. 185, Overwhelming Might IV. All eyes returned to Cain, and they saw the reason behind that shocking scene. They were mistaken when they thought he had shut down his wave cloak, deactivating all his defenses. What happened was that Cain had redirected all his astral wave into his right fist. He used that monstrous amount of power to counter Jota's march, sending this one flying away while puking blood. However, it did not diminish the shock they all felt even after knowing how it happened. Cain's astral wave was already denser and purer than the rest of the wave warriors present, but now he was able to mobilize it at an incredible speed through wave focus. Aaron and the other captains were seeing everything from a distance, and utter awe appeared on their faces as they understood the secret behind Cain's power. They all knew the young soldier had superb control over his astral wave thanks to his willpower, but there was only one way he could achieve those feats they just saw.
He went through blood renewal.
Those words reached the teachers close to them, making utter shock appear on their faces.
Impossible. How can such a young soldier have experienced blood renewal?
One of Wave University's teachers uttered those words, but deep down, they all knew it was the truth. The teacher could not control his voice, so those words echoed through both encampments, allowing soldiers and students to hear them. Most of them did not understand what blood renewal meant, but a considerable portion did, and the way they looked at Cain was as if this one was a monster.
He experienced blood renewal at level 5. No wonder my younger brother gave him such a high assessment.
Amos spoke with a somber tone. Dominic was just as shocked by the news, but he maintained a calm expression, showing the might of his willpower. Cain noticed the gazes of everybody around him and only showed a small smile before his eyes focused on Jota.
Enough games. Thumpy.
Along with Cain's words appeared a heartbeat so strong that all the students and soldiers near him could hear it. They all saw how Cain's skin turned blood red, giving him a ferocious appearance like a monster that made his way out of hell. A smile full of delight appeared on Cain's face as he felt the state of his body. Normally, first gear of Usura Farm would push his cardiovascular system to the limit, but that was no longer the case after blood renewal. However, Cain did not lose time and pushed his wave burst to 3,000% before concentrating all of it on his legs, arms, and spine.
Boom.
A small blast emerged from Cain's location as this one pushed his body forward with a fantastic speed. Jota was just rising from the ground, and even now, he did not understand how it all happened. The last thing he remembered was about to clash with Cain when a sharp pain appeared on his chest, and an incredible force threw his body away. Unfortunately for Jota, he could not think of anything else before a red monster appeared before him. Cain grabbed the golem's face, and without reducing his speed, he kept marching forward, using Jota as a battering ram against all the trees and rocks on the path. Captains, teachers, soldiers, and students saw how Cain dragged Jota through the ground, only raising this one to break the obstacles on his path. The difference between their powers was simply too much. Jota felt as if he was a puppet being dragged by Cain, and the rage in his heart allowed him to gain a moment of clarity. The metal pipes on his arm activated, allowing him to send a vicious punch at Cain's chest. That attack carried a massive amount of power, and since they were very close, it would reach its target instantly. Unfortunately for Jota, Cain saw everything, and with Usura Farm, he was more than fast enough to react. Cain let go of Jota's face and dodged the blow before countering it. Cain's punch landed right on Jota's temple, making the brain of this one shake, but things did not end there. He sent a kick to Jota's chest. Jota's massive golem form rose over 10 meters in the air, and just as he was about to descend, Cain appeared next to him.
Dada.
A scream of pain emerged from the earth golem as Kane connected a ferocious kick in Jota's back, sending this one crashing into the ground.
Boom.
Jota generated a small crater on his landing, but he did not remain there for long as Kane sent another kick to his chest. That started an onslaught as Kane pushed Jota from one place to another, not giving this one even a second to rest. Kane had just made Jota clash against a large boulder, burying this one in it, when his eyes narrowed.
Enough.
Along with that word came a bright green arc of wind that cut the ground between Kane and Jota. Kane focused on the attack and was sincerely impressed by its might. Not only was it fast, but he knew it could morph and change path according to the caster's wishes, something astral wave cultivators like him could not do. There was no killing intent in that attack, and the caster did not hide his actions, so Kane was not enraged by it. He turned toward the origin and saw that the one who attacked was no other than Dominic. The young man with bright green hair stared at Kane with a stern expression while wielding his sword with his right hand. A powerful aura was evoked from every corner of his body and seemed to harmonize with the natural force. Apex. Kane spoke with the system spirit while focusing on Dominic. He wanted to scan this one, but only if no one noticed it.
His energy defenses are special, but he is still a wave warrior, so there should be no problem. At most, he would feel something odd happening, but he would have no way of knowing its origin.
Good enough. Absolute life from system, scan him. As soon as Cyan uttered that command inside his mind, the absolute life form system acted, using the AI chip module to scan Dominic. Dominic frowned, and the grip of his sword tightened as he began to look around. He felt someone watching over him but could not find out who. It did not last long, and Dominic felt nothing wrong with him, but the experience still bothered him greatly. Kane noticed that, but he did not care as he only paid attention to the virtual screen that appeared inside his mind. Scan of target completed. Name, race, Godslayer humankind. Path of power, essence evolution, level 9 wave warrior. Lineage, wave talent, middle tier 6. Stats, strength 3.4. Agility 9.5. Vitality 6.1. Wave 12.9. Note, strange force surrounded the target, similar to the one displayed by Iris. It matches the description of the power known as laws. Kane was surprised by Dominic's stats, especially the physical speed of this one. It would be high even for astral wave cultivators, much less for essence wave cultivators. He was not surprised that Dominic already had access to the laws, but it complicated things. While the raw enhancement granted by blood renewal was better than the one obtained by getting into contact with the laws for the first time, the latter was full of variations. Determining whether blood renewal or laws were better was impossible. It was like saying whether a spear or a sword was a better weapon for war. Both of them had strong points that the other lacked, but in the end, it was all about the user. Despite knowing the chances of victory were small, Kane's eyes still burned with fighting spirit. Fighting opponents that were stronger than him was the only way of breaking beyond his limits. Dominic noticed that battle intent, and he responded with his own. The sword in his hand began to tremble as a powerful gale emerged from it. Kane smiled toward Dominic before deactivating his astral wave and Usura form.
It would be an exciting fight, but I cannot allow myself to get injured.
Kane said before calmly walking toward Dominic and raising his palm. Dominic clenched his fists for a second, but did not delay things, and took out the 3 mid-quality wave crystals from his space ring before handing them to Kane. Kane smiled as he got into contact with those wave crystals. The density and purity of the wave inside them were something those of low quality could not compare. Using mid-quality wave crystals to train would improve Kane's cultivation speed, but he knew that would be a waste. For wave warriors, there was little difference between cultivating with low-quality and mid-quality wave crystals. Kane did not dally too much on his thought and stawed the wave crystals before turning around.
Back to work, we must be ready to fight at any moment.
Those words were enough to mobilize thousands of soldiers. Thank you for listening to the Age of Chaos audio story. Storyfy grows with listeners like you. Support the series by sharing it and join our Telegram for the latest updates. Episode number 186, The Life After High School I. 186. The Life After High School I.
Back to work, we must be ready to fight at any moment.
Only the 300 men had to move when they heard his words, but other than the vice captains, no one remained standing. Kane's overwhelming might was enough to mobilize almost 15,000 soldiers. His commander's aura was born of a combination of his tremendous power, the immense respect he drew from the soldiers' hearts, and his wave king's willpower. Most of the vice captains did not care that the soldiers under their command would instinctively follow Kane's orders. Yet there was a small group that did not think like that, and leading them was no other than Uriel. The young vice captains clenched his fists as he stared at Kane and realized just how strong this one had become.
Ha, Aaron, you sure got lucky. To have such a monster in your battalion, that boy's military feats are bound to be overwhelming.
One of the captains burst into laughter as he saw Kane commanding the soldiers back to the encampment. He had a thin constitution, but a scorching heat surrounded him, making it clear he was very strong.
I like that brat, extremely cunning and fierce. I cannot get enough of the faces of those snobs.
Another captain praised Kane with a smile. She was a very tall woman with blue hair. There was a fierce aura around her body, and around her waist there were a long blade and small daggers. The captain did not hide her voice, and her smile only grew more prominent as he saw the anger in the university teachers. There was no secret that members of the Wave universities saw themselves as superior in many aspects to the military, including training. However, Kane had beaten the best first-year student of the entire collapsing lightning sector without receiving a single wound. The only reason Jota was still alive was due to Kane containing himself and not sending his attack to vital points like the back of the head or spine. None of the captains cared about the annoyed expression on the teachers, and they kept talking among each other.
You told us that boy was strong, but not this much. You brat dare to keep secrets from me. Why did you not tell us he had experienced blood renewal?
The old among the captains spoke, and the way he talked with Aaron was as if he was speaking with a child. Although it might seem odd, Aaron said nothing about how the old man referred to him as a brat. Aaron only showed a smile as he stared at the old captains. He still remembers when he was a new soldier sent to the old captain's battalion.
Geezer, stop spouting nonsense. That boy should have crossed the 75% threshold during the trip to the mountain.
The rest of the captains softly nodded as they heard that. Each room in the Lightning Star cruiser was isolated entirely from the rest of the world, making it a very good and secure cultivation ground. It made sense for Kane to have chosen that place to carry on with his breakthrough, not to mention that the density of the life wave in Blade Mountain was more than 10 times higher than the ones around the Imperial Lightning Fort. That was especially true now that all king beasts were gone and no longer devouring the energy in the surroundings. As the captains talked, the night finally arrived, and it did not come alone.
Roar.
No. OHHH.
The sound of wave beasts emerged from the forest near both encampments, and the situation changed significantly. Those roars belonged to the millions of wave beasts they would be fighting real soon. Although soldiers and students were the hunters, none were naive enough to think that there would not be casualties among them. The wave beasts would not just lay down and accept their death. They would fight with everything they had and kill as many humans as possible before dying. Soldiers were able to handle the pressure of those roars better than students, since many of them had spent years on the battlefield. Still, that did not mean they were unaffected, since not knowing what was hiding in the darkness was terrifying. That was not the worst part. What bothered the soldiers and students most was not knowing if a horde of wave beasts would suddenly march out of the forest and toward them. Hiding during the night in their star cruiser would be counterproductive. It would waste time and make it harder for them to adapt once they have to move the encampment deep into the forest. In the Wave University's encampment, Dominic and Amos saw how many of the students became anxious as they heard those roars. The duo nodded to each other before waving their hands, making dozens of people march around their encampment's perimeters. It did not take long for dozens of 3-meter tall black pillars to cover the Wave University's encampment's perimeters.
These are sentry posts. They will form a force field that will detect any incoming enemy, warning us of the danger in time and sending energy attacks.
Dominic shouted, and his voice echoed through the zone, reaching students and soldiers.
All Wave University's students can rest peacefully.
Dominic spoke those last words before sending an arrogant smile toward the soldiers' encampment. Aaron and the rest of the captains saw that and could not help but frown. They knew about sentry posts, and the reason the military was not using them was that not only were they extremely expensive, but they also used a crazy amount of wave crystals to work. Now that the students were able to sleep well, they could advance faster than the soldiers, who would have to spend their night alert in case a horde appeared out of nowhere. Dominic and Amos knew that, which is why they were willing to waste a small fortune on the wave artifacts. However, their smiles froze the next second. Moments after the sentry posts appeared around the students' encampment, a majestic red force field emerged from the center of the soldiers' encampment. It rose for hundreds of meters, giving everybody a shocking sight before it crashed down, flooding the soldiers' encampment, and it did not stop there. The red force field also crossed into the nearby forest, and everybody could hear wave beasts howling in fear before running away. There was no way that a bunch of weak and unintelligent wave beasts would be able to discern the power behind that ego wave. They only understood that it was the willpower of a wave king, and therefore they needed to run if they wanted to remain alive. Once the force field finished with the wave beasts in the forest, it pulled back, forming a halo around the soldiers' encampment. Cain could see and hear everything inside his ego wave, so it was not good to cover everything.
Stay inside the halo, and you will be safe.
Cain's voice echoed, and his words were much more reassuring than those of Dominic. Dominic and Amos told the students that the sentry posts would warn them about danger and give them time to react, while Cain declared boldly that every soldier inside the red halo would be safe.
Ha ha ha, that boy is amazing. Not only did his willpower match that of a wave king, but his mastery over free ego is superb. Not to mention that the timing was perfect. Just as those cocky brats wanted to show off their wealth, that boy beat them with true power.
The old captain laughed with all his strength as he saw that sight, and the rest of the captains did the same, making sour expressions appear on the university teachers' faces. Dominic's eyes grew cold as he saw that ego wave, and he clenched his fists. However, he did not let rage overcome his mind and took a deep breath before turning toward a large man close to him.
Bring them to me.
The large man nodded before walking toward a corner of the students' encampment. All the students were looking at the red force field with awe and envy, but one among them showed complete disbelief. That young man could not believe it. No, he could not accept the reality that was presented in front of him. Jonathan, Cain's old high school
friend, was sitting with a pale expression and empty eyes, looking at the ego wave bond of a wave king's willpower. As he saw that red force field, Jonathan could not help but remember his last interaction with Cain. It was still clear in his mind how he defeated this one with a single fist after bragging about how he would enroll in Hellblazer University. Back then, Jonathan was sure he would become a shooting star at Hellblazer University, rising above everybody and becoming a powerful noble in a matter of time. However, the reality was not only hard but vicious. What Jonathan obtained once he got into Hellblazer University was everything but glory. Thank you for listening to the Age of Chaos audio story. Storyfy grows with listeners like you. Support the series by sharing it and join our Telegram for the latest updates. Episode number 187, The Life After High School, 187, The Life After High School, II. Jonathan still remembered his first day at Hellblazer University. The last years in his high school, where he was practically an overlord to the others, filled him with a sense of superiority, and it did not disappear when he reached the campus. He walked with his head high and with Cynthia by his side. His ability to bring someone with him made his sense of superiority even higher. However, Jonathan soon noticed that something was odd. Unlike the other students on the campus, he and Cynthia had to wear a mandatory green outfit, and whenever people saw it, they would throw nasty smirks in their direction. Jonathan was confused but confident about getting an answer after his first class. The moment he reached the auditorium, he saw that everybody in that place wore green uniforms and none seemed remarkable in any form, unlike the other students from noble families. When the teacher reached the auditorium, Jonathan wanted to ask about the special uniforms they were all wearing. The teachers in his high school treated him as a boss, so he was used to shouting at them. Unfortunately for Jonathan, the old man that gave this class was not happy about it, and the moment this one heard a student demanding an answer, he reacted ferociously. Jonathan did not even notice when a palm slapped him so hard that he crashed against the wall with a bloody mouth and broken teeth. The other students were shocked and lowered their heads, not daring to utter a sound. After venting out a little, the old teacher was in a better mood and explained to everybody their situation. Even though they attended Hellblazer University, they were not technically students, but part of the Grass class. The Grass class was a particular class that the Hellblazer University generated to gather low-level students that would one day become the Hellblazer family's foot soldiers. Those who dreamed of becoming great warriors and rising to the stars were idiotic to think this place would grant them that chance. That realization shattered the heart of many of the people in the Grass class. They all had similar backgrounds, children of humble origins who were blessed with wave talent better than anyone around them. Unfortunately, while they thought themselves unique, they were very common. They might be 1 in 1,000, but with a sector whose population is in the dozens of billions, they were nothing special. That realization broke some, but others reacted differently. If they were bound to be foot soldiers, they would be the king of the foot soldiers. Jonathan also sought that path, but even among the Grass class, he was nothing remarkable. He lacked spells that could allow him to use his essence wave properly, and more powerful students that followed the astral rebirth path of power easily crushed him. Although Jonathan lost the fight for leadership of the Grass class, he was still mildly talented, so he should have been able to have a fair time at Hellblazer University. Sadly for the young man, something happened that put him on the blacklist of the Grass class leader, and people began to bully him. Just like Jonathan did with Cain, rallying the entire high school against this one, the Grass class leader did the same with him. The shock of once again being a weak student intimidated by others after being a king for the last years was more than he could handle. A hot nightmare emerged in Jonathan, and despite having spent a year in Hellblazer University, he was still a level 2 essence wave warrior. When Jonathan saw Cain again, something reignited inside him. Jonathan felt that if he could crush Cain again, he would feel like his previous self, which is why he acted so enraged when this one ignored him. Although he did not dare to say a word after the Grass class leader shouted at him, Jonathan planned to find Cain after everything was over and teach this one a lesson. However, Jonathan's stupid dreams broke when he saw how Cain unleashed an overwhelming power that defeated the best first-year student in the collapsing lightning sector. Unlike Jonathan, who became a joke for everybody in his class, Cain rose to become a dragon among men capable of commanding more than 10,000 soldiers.
It cannot be right. It must be a mistake.
Jonathan uttered those words again and again. His eyes had lost focus, and his mind could not process all that was happening. However, when Jonathan noticed a young man with a large body and brown hair come by, he instinctively reacted and rose from the ground before saluting.
Jonathan greets Grass class ruler Samir.
Jonathan's willpower and dignity had faded a long time ago, and he did not dare to infuriate the Grass class leader, which is why he reacted like that. However, while the young man with brown hair usually smiled when he saw Jonathan full of fear, this time, he was enraged as this one shouted Grass class ruler so high.
Grass class ruler, I did not know there was such a title in Hellblazer University.
It was only after hearing those words that Jonathan noticed that there was a man next to Samir. This one wore an impressive robe with a bursting volcano on it, a member of the Hellblazer family. Jonathan was sure of his guess once he saw how the usually arrogant Samir reacted so meekly with this man.
Haha, Lord Joseph, do not take the words of this stupid person seriously. He is clearly spouting nonsense. I would never dare call myself the Grass class ruler when we all know that the Hellblazer family is in control, and we are mere foot soldiers.
Samir smiled as he lowered his head so much that he almost bowed to the man. Jonathan was surprised to see that. He found it hard to believe that the always cocky Samir would lower his head like that. However, those thoughts vanished from his mind the next second and were replaced by overwhelming rage as he saw the person behind the duo.
You.
The target of Jonathan's rage was no other than the woman he brought with him to the Hellblazer University, Cynthia. Thank you for listening to the Age of Chaos audio story. Storyfy grows with listeners like you. Support the series by sharing it and join our Telegram for the latest updates. Episode number 188, Cain Lorifer's Background. 188, Cain Lorifer's Background. When Samia heard Jonathan's shout to Cynthia, his eyes grew cold, but he did not dare to do anything with Joseph next to him. Jonathan noticed Samia's eyes, and he immediately shut up and lowered his head, but that did not diminish the loath and rage he felt in his heart. He still remembered how Cynthia acted with him in high school and was sure the woman would follow his every command once they reached Hellblazer University, but things did not go according to his wishes. The moment Cynthia saw that Jonathan would be nothing more than an average student among the grass class, she moved on. Cynthia used her charms to cling to someone else, and that person was no other than the strongest member of the grass class. Due to Samia's relationship with Cynthia, he used his power on the grass class to target Jonathan, making the life of this one a living hell. After all that, it was no wonder that Jonathan hated Cynthia so much, but he could do nothing about it. Not only was the woman under Samia's protection, but unlike his, her cultivation had advanced, and she was already a level 3 Essence Wave warrior. Cynthia did not take her eyes away from Jonathan, and there was nothing but disdain in them. She looked at Jonathan the same way she looked at Cain when they were back in high school. Joseph saw how Jonathan and Cynthia acted around each other, and since he found the woman in Samia's residence, he could deduce the relationship between the trio. However, nothing of that mattered to him. If it weren't for this assignment, he would not even bother to speak with people of the grass class.
Samia, go back to your post. As for you two, follow me to the center of command.
Joseph did not say anything else before turning around and walking to the student encampment center of command. The trio had no right to ask questions and could only follow his order without hesitation. Other than physical training and cultivation, all the students in the grass class were indoctrinated into following the Hellblazer family's orders, so it was no wonder that Samia, Jonathan, and Cynthia did what Joseph told them. It did not take long for Joseph, Jonathan, and Cynthia to reach the center of command. The moment Jonathan and Cynthia stepped inside, they immediately grew nervous as they saw more than 30 geniuses, all with powerful auras much stronger than theirs.
Lord Dominic, I brought the Jew you requested. They are Jonathan Carvery and Cynthia Orland from the Hellblazer Academy's grass class.
Dominic had not even glanced at the duo when they entered the building, but his eyes grew sharp and focused on them after hearing that.
I see, thanks for your help.
Joseph only nodded before walking toward Amos and standing behind this one in complete silence. Cynthia and Jonathan grew increasingly nervous as they saw these people focusing on them. They knew enough to understand that everyone here had a powerful background and could get rid of them with a simple command.
You two, come closer.
The duo did not dare to disobey Dominic's words and approached him.
Do you know why I sent someone to bring you here?
Jonathan was so nervous he could not speak, much less figure out what was happening, but Cynthia was different. The woman took a deep breath before answering.
It is due to our relationship with Cain Lorifer.
Dominic's eyes narrowed as he saw the confidence in Cynthia's voice and smiled before nodding.
That is right, it is exactly because of that.
Cynthia showed a lovely smile as she heard Dominic's response. Although the young man did not praise her, she took those words as such. Janatha saw that, and the rage in his heart only grew stronger. This slut! There was nothing he would have wanted to do now more than to push Cynthia to the ground, but he did not even dare to look up, much less do something like that with so many powerful people around him. Dominic saw how they reacted but cared very little about their feelings.
You two will tell me all you know about Cain Lorifer's past and your relationship with him. By the way, I am aware of a lot of the information you are about to give me, so I advise you not to hide or lie about anything to me.
Dominic's voice grew cold at the last part, making it clear to Cynthia and Jonathan that telling the truth was their only path. Complicated expressions appeared in the duo when they heard Dominic's command. If they told the truth about their relationship with Cain, then everybody here would know that they paid for his kindness and friendship with nothing but cruelty and betrayal. However, Jonathan and Cynthia did not dare lie, so they told everything they knew about Cain and their relationship. When the people in the room heard how Jonathan and Cynthia began to bully Cain when they gained power, disdain appeared on their faces. Even if the students did not like Cain, that did not mean they would despise any less those that betrayed their friends. Dominic did not show anything and continued hearing everything with a calm expression, and nodded from time to time until the Duke finished with their report.
I see, so Cain Lorifer endured all that and managed to keep his head high all this time. No wonder his willpower is so immense. It will be tough to handle a man like that. How can that be right? Can you just use your background to take care of him?
Jonathan had just uttered those words when he realized where he was and immediately shut his mouth. He was terrified of everybody here, but could not endure it when he heard how Dominic praised Cain. Even now, Jonathan could not accept that Cain had grown so much while he was nothing but a shadow of his previous self. Dominic's calm smile grew cold as he heard how Jonathan dared to utter what seemed to be a disagreement with his opinion. If it weren't for Jonathan's connection to Cain, he would have never allowed this one in his presence. However, Dominic also noticed that many people looked in his direction after Jonathan's words. Although killing someone was against the laws and codes of the Empire, it was not as if they had not done it before. Of course, killing a vice-captain like Cain would not be easy, and if there were any evidence left, it would generate all sorts of problems. Yet it could be done if they were smart about it, and this was the perfect chance since they were in a place full of powerful enemies. Dominic glanced at Amos, and this one nodded. There was information that the member of the Hellblazer family had only shared with Dominic, but it seemed it was time for the others to know it as well.
Cain Lorifer might have been an orphan a year ago, but now he is the young lord of the Valentine family. Regarding background, Cain's is as strong as mine, maybe even stronger.
Utter silence appeared in the faces of everybody present, and the news shocked Cynthia and Jonathan more than anybody. The friend they threw away because they believed it was too weak to be alongside them now had a background they could not even imagine. Thank you for listening to the Age of Chaos audio story. Storyfy grows with listeners like you. Support the series by sharing it and join our Telegram for the latest updates. Episode number 189, Enemies in All Fronts.
That is true.
A voice came from a corner of the room, and people turned only to see the badly wounded Jota with an expression of utter shock and defeat on his face. Cain had wounded him severely, but since none of the attacks generated brain trauma, Jota was able to regain consciousness after a couple of hours. Jota felt no gratitude at all toward Cain for this one not aiming at vital organs and wanted nothing more than to pay back the humiliation. He knew that defeating Cain in a direct battle would be pointless and was preparing to use the power of his family, but now that was not possible. The Hammer family was a noble family with a Marquis as its founder, and Wave Kings were among its members. Just one Wave King was enough for a noble family to stand among the highest ranks of the Empire, but how could Jota not know about the Valentine family? That Valentine family only had one member, but it was one of the 9 pillars of the collapsing lightning sector. Every family with some power in the sector knew that Zarak Valentine was capable of crushing Wave Kings with nothing more than his pure willpower. Offending a monster like that was something Jota knew his family would never do. If things were to escalate and he offended Zarak, no one could save him. Dominic saw the awe in the eyes of Jota and the others. Although he was not happy, he understood it. After all, going from an orphan with 0 talent to the greatest genius of the collapsing Lightning Military Academy and the young lord of the Valentine family in less than a year was beyond amazing. After a moment, Dominic's eyes returned to Cynthia, and a scheming light appeared in his eyes.
Young lady, do you think you could reignite Cain's feelings for you under the proper circumstances? I will do all in my power to help you with that, if you think you're up to the task.
Cynthia was surprised by that proposition, as were the other people in the room. After a moment, an arrogant expression appeared on her face, and she began to smile. If she could charm Cain, she could become the young lady of a powerful, noble family as strong as Dominic's. It would not be hard since, in her mind, Cain was surely still in love with her.
With Lord Dominic's help, I am sure Cain will fall under my charm. I dare to say that he has not forgotten about me.
Cynthia's arrogance surprised the people in the room, and they could not help but think the woman was delusional. She really thought highly of herself, yet she was nothing but average.
I am glad you are so confident in your abilities. Go to my residence and wait for me there. We will speak of our next movements in private.
Dominic spoke with a charming smile, and Cynthia did not hesitate before nodding. She did not show any reluctance to be alone with Dominic. Even if something were to happen, it was not like it would be the first time. One of the men behind Dominic walked toward Cynthia and guided her out of the center of command. After Cynthia was gone, Dominic turned toward Jonathan with a cold expression.
You are useless to me since I doubt Cain Lorifer even remembers you. If you utter a word of what you saw here, you will be charged with treason and die. Return to your post.
Jonathan's eyes showed the disbelief in which he found himself. Once again, the woman he once thought was his property rose above him, and he stood there like a clown. There was no will in Jonathan's eyes as he walked away from the room like a zombie and returned to his residence in the grass class section. None of the presents cared about him, and they doubted he would survive the first month of the hunt.
Do you really believe that woman can charm Cain Lorifer?
Amos asked the question on everybody's mind once Jonathan left the room.
Ha ha ha, of course not.
Dominic busted into laughter the moment he heard that.
If Cain Lorifer were the kind of man that would fall for a woman like that, he would have never risen to his current position. However, that doesn't mean we cannot use her to affect his mind.
A scheming light appeared in Dominic's eyes as a devious plan formed in his mind. Back in the soldier encampment, Uriel was walking toward the center of command, and his face could not be uglier. He was not alone since 4 other vice captains were walking alongside him, and their expressions showed annoyance at the current situation. The primary source of the anger of the 5 vice captains was the red foss that covered the soldier encampment. These 5 were unusual among the rest of the vice captains since they all came from mighty noble families and had their full support behind them. The ancestor had sent them to the military with the sole goal that they could gain merits and rise among the ranks, and each of them received a lot of wealth so they could use it to help them in their task. Those noble families even asked for a lot of favors so the 5 would end up in the same battalion so that they could help each other in that mission. The imperial military force knew about their behavior, but as long as they respected the rules and codes of the military and did their job well enough, they turned a blind eye. Uriel and the other 4 vice captain knew surveillance would be a significant problem in the first part of the hunt, so they used their own money to buy sentry posts just like the ones used by Dominic. They had been ready to show their sentry posts right after Dominic did it, becoming the center of attention for both the student and soldier encampments, but all that planning went to waste once Cain unleashed his ego wave. Uriel could do nothing after that happened. If he took out his sentry posts after that, he would only be making a fool of himself.
This is the second time that Brat got in my way. There will not be a third.
Thank you for listening to the Age of Chaos audio story. Storyfy grows with listeners like you. Support the series by sharing it and join our Telegram for the latest updates. Episode number 191st March.
Remember, we must present a solid front. If we allow that brat to carry on unchecked, we will lose our chance to shine. We must convince the rest of the vice captains to side with us.
The other 4 vice captains nodded as they heard Uriel's words. Making an enemy of such a talented man like Cain was not something they wanted, but siding with Uriel had proven beneficial for all of them again and again, so they would follow him. Uriel understood that his bond with the other 4 was not so strong that they would give their life for him, but he knew how to manipulate their greed. As Uriel approached the soldier encampment center of command, a solemn expression appeared on his face. Even if he hated Cain, there was no way to deny the might of the red foss field this one was unleashing. Uriel did his best to hide it, but his eyes showed envy. He knew about the ego eternal path of power, and that Cain was a divine genius for reaching the first realm at such a young age. Of course, Uriel was sure that if he had been born with an awakened ego matrix, his achievements in the ego eternal path of power would have been even more outstanding than Cain's.
Despite his talent in the ego eternal path of power, he is still a brat. Using his ego wave as this must push his mind to the limit. I am sure he cannot focus on anything else now, so we must take advantage of it.
Uriel was full of confidence, but the moment he entered the center of command, a sense of shock appeared on his face. Cain stood at the center of the room in front of a holographic platform that depicted the entire Blade Mountain. He flawlessly explained the troops' movements through the thousands of kilometers of forest and the hundreds of mountain ranges.
You are late.
Kane spoke as he stared at the five with eyes glowing with red light before focusing again on the holographic platform. He was not putting up a strong front or overexerting himself. If his willpower were still at the peak wave champion rank, it would have been hard for him to use ego wave and focus on other tasks, but things are different now. The willpower of a wave king was exponentially stronger than a wave champion. It not only allowed Kane's mastery over free ego to be much greater, but his mental powers were so great that he could carry on two completely separate trains of thought. For example, right now, part of his mind was focused on his ego wave, monitoring the entire encampment, while the other part explained the battle formation to the rest of the vice captains. The four vice captains beside Uriel frowned as they saw that. Clearly, Kane had more than enough mental power to keep his ego wave across the encampment and develop fantastic battle strategies. Uriel could feel their gazes, but was just as confused as them. According to his understanding of the ego-eternal path of power, it should take all of Kane's focus to perform this level of free ego. Power.
As you can see, an extensive mountain range divides the first section of the forest into two large. The group was the last to arrive since the other 45 vice captains were already there, so even if they were enraged by Kane's words, there was nothing they could say. They remained silent as they approached the holographic platform, focusing on Kane's words, looking for a flaw they could exploit. Uriel clenched his fists as he heard Kane's strategies, since they were better than what he could develop. They took full advantage of the terrain, enhancing the army's defensive and offensive power.
As you can see, an extensive mountain range divides the first section of the forest into two large areas, so we will not have to worry about those coming from the wave universities. My battle formations are somewhat crude right now, as I am unaware of the battle power and specialties of the other battalions, so I am open to any input. I will do my best to improve them with each battle. I suggest we use my battle formation and thoroughly analyze them after the first encounter with wave champion beasts. Also, I will generate a chat room where every battalion can share their status, and I will adjust the battle formation mid-battle.
When the other vice captain heard the last part, they all showed shock and awe in their eyes. Kane's battle formations were already better than anything they could come up with, but the fact that he declared he would adjust them mid-battle was incredible.
Are you sure you can bear that responsibility?
A young man with golden hair and blue eyes spoke solemnly. When the other vice captains turned toward him, they all showed respect. Kane recognized the man as Anthony Farlight. He was just a year older than Kane, but was already a level 9 Essence Wave warrior, and his auras might made it clear he was far from average. There was no ill will in Anthony's voice, and he was sincerely impressed by Kane's strategies, but while adjusting the formation mid-battle would be of great help, it could easily lead to catastrophe. Kane stared at Anthony, his eyes bursting with red light.
I would not have proposed it if I was not sure I could do it.
Anthony stared at Kane for a moment, before nodding and turning toward another person in the room.
I am fine with it. What about you, William? The one Anthony called William was a young man of his same age, with black hair and brown eyes, whose body unleashed a shocking physical might. William stared at Kane for a moment before nodding. After seeing that Anthony and William accepted, all the other vice captains nodded. The last ones to respond to Kane's strategies and plans were Uriel and the other 4 vice captains by his side. The animosity between Uriel and Kane was no secret, so even if this one rejected the plans, the other vice captains had already spoken. Uriel was smart enough to know when not to fight, so he just nodded, along with the other 4. Like that, the battle formation and plans for the first march were complete, and the entire military force was ready to march with the first ray of sunlight. Thank you for listening to the Age of Chaos audio story. Storyfy grows with listeners like you. Support the series by sharing it and join our Telegram for the latest updates.